Good afternoon and welcome to The Law. This is your legal light. It is your health law. I'm Samson Ladia Yanini, and this afternoon, I know that you are so ready because of your comments and your reactions and questions on our social media pages as soon as we put up the topic we are treating today. Invalid Islamic marriages. You may have heard the Registrar General, those in charge of marriages, say that 80% of marriages conducted under Islam are invalid in the face of the Ghanaian law. But there's a research by Ghanaian Law that suggests that it may be 100% invalid marriages. What are the consequences and what should be the way forward? Dennis Ejejumo of Ghanaian Law and managing partner of A+ attorneys, and also Attorneys Plus, and also Hanifa Yahya of Hay and Partners, managing partner. Join me this afternoon to look for solutions. We will obviously open the phone lines for you to also join. Thank you very much. A sincere apologies that we start late. We're right back.
Law 101. Marriages Act 1984 Cap 127. Registration of Marriages Section 24. Method of registration. The bridegroom, the bride's wali, 2 witnesses to the marriage, and a Mohammedan priest licensed under Section 21 shall, as soon as conveniently may be, and before the expiration of a week after the celebration of the marriage, attend at the office of the District Chief Executive for the purpose of registering the marriage.
Right. So that was our Law 101, as we always do on this show. It is the Section 24 of the Marriages Act 1984, Cap 127. That is a law in Ghana that governs marriages. If a marriage is properly done or improperly done, or a marriage is one that is seen as proper marriage or it's not, it is that law that will tell you whether it is right or it is not. And the provision we just brought to you says that the bridegroom, the bride's wali, 2 witnesses to the marriage, and a Mohammedan priest licensed under Section 21. So there must be a priest who has a license from the government of Ghana, shall, as soon as conveniently may be, and before the expiration of a week after the celebration of the marriage, attend at the office of the District Chief Executive for the purpose of registering the marriage. And the emphasis you see there is ours. Thank you. Now, let me bring in my guest. Because the Law 101 is so direct on what we're dealing this afternoon, we will not spend time explaining just that. We'll go straight to our subject matter. And as I announced to you earlier, Dennis Ejejumo is managing partner, Law Plus Attorneys, managing partner of Law Plus Attorneys, and Hanifa Yahya is managing partner, Hay and Partners at Law. Now, if you remember her, during COVID, you know how we started the show? It was a COVID-induced show. When we're treating one of the issues about tenants, rents, and how to survive COVID when you couldn't afford to pay your rent and the rest of them. One of our very first topics on landlord and tenants, she was here to help us with the education. Hanifa, thank you so very much for making time to join us.
You're welcome, Sams.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me back.
Right. And Dennis will join us by electronically shortly. So, Dennis Law is a reputable, law group, so to speak. It's a legal platform. And they have done a research. And the summary of the research is that what the law calls Mohammedan marriage, as in Islamic marriage, is what is most preferred among persons of the Islamic faith in Ghana. Of course, if you're a Muslim, you definitely want to marry through what your faith requires. There is a rigorous statutory framework that exists for the registration of such marriages and divorces. And there's a specific provision of the law, we will share it with you, section 27, which tells you that if you don't do one thing, this marriage is not recognized. And even a divorce, when it happens and it's not done under these rules, is also not recognized. Now, for registration of marriages and divorces, the law has provided for them. It is mandatory that the marriage is registered within a week after it is celebrated or it is deemed to be invalid. There are no lawful Islamic marriages in Ghana because since the law was passed in the colonial era, the Ministry of Interior has not put in place a regime to license priests like in Christendom. The clergy, they have license. That's what they use to be able to conduct your marriages for you in the church. Or even if they are doing it outside of the church, that's things are supposed to be done. And the MMDAs have no systems for registering these marriages. Just this week, we woke to news that the head of marriages at the Registrar General's Department is complaining that 80% of marriages ordained in the Islamic religion in Ghana are not valid. This disclosure is reported to have been made at a roundtable discussion on the theme Working Together for a Better Society, organized by civic society organization Telling Ghana. What does this mean and what are the implications, particularly including when property matters come in to be talked about? So, Hanifa, I'm sure that you will not be surprised at the results of the survey. If you are, tell me why.
I am not surprised at all, Samson.
Right.
I am not surprised. And I'm wondering where the 20% are. Perhaps they have gone under the cap 129 or customary marriage.
Okay.
Perhaps.
Okay.
Because I know that some people would go and register under the marriage ordinance because there are no forms at the Registrar General for you to pick up to register.
For the Islamic marriage.
Islamic marriage.
So you are saying when they say that 80%,
yes,
then it means the 20%, there's a possibility
that they have converted the Islamic marriage either into a customary marriage. Or the marriage ordinance.
The marriage ordinance.
Yes, the monogamous marriage.
Which is like a Christian marriage.
Yes. Yes.
We'll get back to that,
yes,
because that is something else to break down.
Yes.
So the research by Dennis Law, how did you receive it? And reading it, I saw your name there.
Yes, yes. Dennis started this, so before we start, let's give Dennis a lot of credit.
Right.
He's not a Muslim, but these are conversations that Muslim lawyers have had in groups and in practice. And frustrations have been raised about how when a Muslim lawyer, knowing that the law requires registration, after the marriage, they go to the district assembly and they don't have the forms. In fact, they are surprised. What are you doing here? Because, you know, there's nothing like that. So if you need to register, then the two existing options, which are easily available, you know, they go for it. Before we continue, I think we need to set it out clearly.
Right.
That this is not Islamic law conversation.
Thank you.
Number one. Two, this is not a religious conversation.
Thank you.
This is a conversation about the law affecting Islamic marriages in Ghana.
Thank you.
This law predates you and I, our grandparents. It is not new. It's just that we don't even know about it.
And let me tell you the reason for the emphasis that Hanifa is making. When we put out the subject matter on social media, there are Muslims genuinely, perhaps they don't know or they don't understand the background for this discussion, who have been very angry. They are like, what are you talking about? Get off. What do you mean? We are marrying under Islam and it is recognized, and you come here to say Islamic marriages are not recognized and so on. So I've seen other people who are trying to explain to those who don't understand where this is coming from. And they say that, well, they are talking about the laws of Ghana. You're a Muslim, but you live in Ghana. You must live under Ghana law. Ghana law says if your marriage must be recognized as valid or a divorce under Islam is valid, it must go through this process. So better pay attention and take the education. Thank you for that caveat. Right.
You're welcome, Samson. So you can imagine my excitement when Dennis, you know, told me that this is what he was doing, and I said, this is a worthy cause. We will support all we can. So I have assisted in proofreading. I haven't done much of the research work. I have given my layman's view of some of the issues. I've proofread some of the material for Dennis, so Dennis takes all the credit. Having said that, so this is a real issue, and as
but because you say Dennis, it's quite it's a team.
Dennis and his team, yes.
I've read a list of a good number of people,
team, yes.
Right?
Dennis and his team.
So we should say Dennis Law.
Dennis Law,
right?
Yes. Dennis and his team. They really put this together, and it's very commendable. So yes, so we are not saying that the 80% the Registrar of General has stated out, if it's correct, means that 80% of the marriages are not valid in the eyes of God. That's not what we are saying. If you did, in fact, this is a subject of another debate that scholars, Islamic scholars, would argue about. I'm sure you can host 4 programs because issues come up about how we celebrate our marriages these days. The Islamic prescription and then the cultural bits that we mix together and all of that. So, you know, that's another subject. But what we are saying is that, so if you do it before the Islamic prescriptions, before God, perhaps in the eyes of Allah, your marriage is valid. But in the eyes of the law
of Ghana, if you don't register within 1 week as stipulated by the law, it is not valid. And the courts have consistently upheld that because the provision is very clear. You must register within 1 week, failing which it is invalid. In Remia, I think they managed to produce a marriage certificate. And so the law said that it was valid because the certificate was there. I'm wondering how they got it. Perhaps in the 60s, in the 80s, we had registered priests. So she's referring to a case that went to court and was concluded, and it's titled Remia and Remia. Right. Now, when you say, and people are listening and say, you are saying the law says within 1 week from the day that the marriage was celebrated.
Yes.
What does that mean?
So, you know, Muslim marriages are usually done on Sundays. It's usually, sometimes it can be a week-long affair. If you are the bride, you know that for 2 weeks or a month, you know, you are preparing for your marriage and then into the marriage. But on the Sundays, that is when, for most people, I'm sure other people do Saturdays, but usually Sundays. So Sunday, that is where family will gather. They will perform the Islamic rites, which is the payment of the bride price, and then the, you know, tying of the knots in the mosque, or they call the religious clerics to come and recite the Quran and pray, and then, you know, tie the knot between the man and the woman. And then after that, the parties and the dancing and the celebration and all of that. That is what we call the marriage. And this is usually done on the Sundays. So so the Sunday, it means that by the law, 7 days after the celebration. So I'm sure it counts on that Sunday, 7 days. The law didn't even state whether it's 7 working days or just 7 days. So I'm sure
within.
It says within.
Within a week.
Within a week. So between the Sunday and the next Sunday, you must have registered.
So the very last day that you do the activity, that finishes the process of the marriage.
Yes.
You start counting
on that
1 week from that day.
Yes.
Then you have to go and register it.
Yes.
If you do not register it within that 1 week,
yes,
that's why Ghana law says that marriage is invalid.
However, there's a provision that says that you can go to the High Court by motion for the court to extend the time within which you can register.
It says you go ex parte.
Yes.
Meaning you can go alone. You don't.
Yes, you don't need to serve
anybody. It's a simple
anybody.
process.
It is you and your husband. You have now become a couple.
Okay.
And so you don't need to give anybody notice that you want to, you know, to register your marriage. So you go ex parte, apply to the High Court, and then the High Court may, on terms, grant leave for extension of time. I think there's one of those decided cases where the wife, after the death of the husband, went to court seeking to get the marriage extension of time to register the marriage. Unfortunately for her, the man had died, and this was 34 years after the marriage was, you know, was celebrated. So the court said, look, at this point, it's too long, it's unreasonable time. Again, the man is dead. There's nothing to register.
Hold on there. So Hanifa talks about death occurring in marriage. And you ask the question, how does somebody get up after the death of the spouse to now say, I'm going to register the marriage? Start thinking. Sometimes it will be because of property. That I want the law to recognize that I am the person's only wife or only husband. Therefore, how is the property to be distributed? Somehow, something like that. This is when the major debate comes and confusion may set in. Dennis Ejejumo, Law Plus attorneys, he joins us. And the research that was done, it's actually titled Married but Not a Spouse-in-Law, Examining the Validity of Islamic Marriages in Ghana. It's such a long title that we can't put all of it on our flyer or on our screen. That's why we simplified it, Invalid Islamic Marriages. But it is Married but Not a Spouse-in-Law, Examining the Validity of Islamic Marriages in Ghana. It's a 42-page research, and you love to read it. It's very fresh. It's actually done in February 2023. Dennis, thanks so very much for making time to join us. Please unmute your mic.
Okay, so thanks Samson, and thanks Hanifa for the wonderful.
What instigated this research? I know you a bit, and I know that you do quite a bit of service for people up north. I don't know if that is where the influence came, that you discovered that you and your team needed to look into this and to begin to force the state to do the right thing. What led to this?
Okay, Samson, thank you very much. First of all, those who know my background knows my affiliation with the Muslim community, where I'm coming from, which is Otafi in Kumasi. We have a big Zongo community. Secondly, people who hail from my community, be it Hausa or Dagomba, are also from my town. So if you know Kumasi very well, from Tafu Zongo to Moshi Zongo, through to Habuabu and Aswase, We have a big community, and these are people who are kinsmen. And apart from that, my affiliation with work that I do in northern part of the country, and the people who have had impact in my life coming from that part of the country. Last year, the team worked on bylaws, and then if you remember, Samson, you gave an opportunity for us to speak on it. And what the team have decided to do is that every year we'll look at one area of the law which we think is very significant, which relates to either enforcement, non-compliance relating to it, or need reform in that regard. Now, on the bigger issue of this particular matter, we happen to do a case where, unknown to the woman, he had been divorced by the husband in Ghana, and that was ordinance marriage. And it caused us to interrogate it. These are areas that after school or somebody has assigned to you, you don't actually pay attention to it. Then we decided to look at an aspect. We have a bigger project relating to Marry Right Ghana, in which our core focus is on marriage and family. And in the course of doing that, we realized that there appears to be a dangerous law, which we consider as an unjust law, which has existed in our statute book as far back as 1907, which basically say that an unregistered Islamic marriage happens to be a nullity. And most of my friends in the Islamic community, whenever we talk about Mohammedans, I understand that when we did the research, it came out that they do not consider themselves as Mohammedans, so they even have a problem with the name. So what I explained to them is that, unfortunately, the law equates Mohammedan to Islamic. Anybody who celebrates marriage in accordance with Islamic tenets is deemed to be a Mohammedan in accordance with Ghanaian law. We may not like the law, and that's all part of the conversation that we are having, that how best can we put measures in place to repeal this particular law. Now, if you look at Article 35 of the Constitution, there is an obligation on the part of the state to give all Ghanaians access to public services, and public services include registration of marriages. Now, our research will show that there is no system of even registration of marriages, and these are things that is a major concern to me. How do you say one of the people who was very influential in my life, and she's still alive, Matamalam in Otaf, who sells kuku, they have been married to Malam, and over the years, you tell him for over 42 years of marriage, and you say that he is not married in law. And whenever there is an issue that comes up with it, we have to deal with it. So for me, we decided to look at it because I'm personally biased towards it. I think that matters relating to Zango communities have not been brought, in my respectful opinion, have not been brought to the major highlight. And especially, this is a fundamental issue that relates to the family. And there is an obligation on the part of the state to protect the family. And for that matter, it is important that we discuss these issues.
Right. And I see that quite a number of people provided what you call invaluable assistance in the process. I've seen Justice Said Kwekujan, the Deputy Attorney General, Dinah Sunaba Dapa, Angela Jamina Boaji, Sheila Minka Premo, Kweku Aribik, is that how you say it? Dr.
Yes,
Ali Nacha, yes, Dr. Ali Nacha, of course, our sister Hanifa sitting right here, Seidu Nasigri, Ali Gafaru, these are all lawyers. Then Rashid Kwesi Ichiafo, Adam Awal Mohammed, Alhaji Salim Ango, Alhaji Al-Hassan Suleiman, and Miss Hawa Ibrahim, as well as Honorable Yusuf Isaka Jaja. So, how did you go about this research to start with?
Okay, so this research required us to look at the framework of the law and basically try to speak with people who the law particularly affects. So if you look at the framework of the law, the beneficiaries of these, or the duty plays of as basically members within the Islamic community. And so there is a need for you to speak to people who are within the Islamic community. And interesting bit is that in terms of the intelligentsia of the community, some of them are aware, and there are measures that are being put in place to try and address them. Only that we think that the particular non-registration invalidity clause should be dealt with emergency, so that we will look at other matters holistically. And then other institutions that is mentioned relates to the Ministry of Interior. The Ministry of Interior, because the requirement of those who have to sign on to the document happens to be a Mohammedan priest licensed by the Ministry of Interior. Then the other aspect relates to local government. Now, in terms of local government, is because the Register of Marriages with regards to Mohammedan or Islamic marriages is the district or municipal chief executive. So even ordinary registrar of marriages at the assembly cannot deal with it. The law specifically mentions the district chief executive. And then most importantly to other members of the community. So, and with that one requires you to speak to the Ministry of Local Government. And something to remember that when we worked on the bylaws, we had a good relations, and I could say that certain progress has been made, only that we think that more work needs to be done in that area. So these are the key people that will, and apart from that too, the various sets of the Islamic community. So we had an opportunity of speaking to Ahmadis, the Tijanis, among other people relating to it. And Sigri happens to be the chairman for the Zongo Development Fund, and we felt that it was important that we had a conversation with him regards to it, and the principal marriage officer.
I'll return to. Okay, go ahead.
With regards to the Ministry of Interior, our question was very simple. What is the system in place of licensing or gazetting Mohammedan priests, which the law imposes on you? And the answer was obvious, or also quite shocking. It was zero. There's no system of registering Mohammedan priests. What it means is that even if you want to register your marriage, you and the bride's wali and the people involved want to register your marriage, there is nobody, and we have worked on the data on licensed venues and licensed gazetted marriage officers from 1907 to date. We could not find, and working with and funny, interestingly, when we work at the archives, a lady there who was also a Muslim, Aisha, was very influential in terms of getting us the data with regards to the old laws and license. And till date, we have not seen a document or gazetted document, and gazette is always published by Assembly Press. We could not see any.
So let's break this down a bit for our audience. Section 24 of the law, first section 23 says, if you are a Muslim and you are marrying, you need to marry, and you want your marriage to be valid, you must marry under this law, because this is Ghana law.
Yes.
And
so let me explain that point very well. Remember that in terms of marriage and freedom of association and religion, marriage is one aspect which touches on a little bit of association between you and your spouse, and a little bit of religion, and among other factors. But remember that no right is absolute. In terms of Ghanaian law, the three types of marriages that has only been sanctioned are these three. Either you marry in accordance to customary law, you marry in accordance with Mohammedan law, or you marry in accordance with civil marriage or Christian marriage or ordinance marriage, as we may want to put it. So if you do not fall within any three of these, I'm sorry to say that the Ghanaian law does not recognize your marriage in Ghana. And so you have to put yourself in one of the brackets. And we realize that when it comes to Mohammedan marriages, that's like other marriages, there you could see there is an intersection between customary marriage and customary principles and also the Quranic aspect. So sometimes people want to say that, okay, if it's not correct, is it customary? But it is very difficult to go and tell somebody who subscribes to the tenets of the Holy Quran that his marriage is a customary marriage than a marriage as subscribed by Islam.
All right, so the law that we are all referring to is right here in Ghana's law, and it is the Marriages Act 1984 to 1985. All laws regarding marriage have been brought together under one law to call it the Cap 127. And like Dennis just explained, there are three forms of marriages that are recognized in Ghana. Either it's a customary marriage, what some of you call traditional marriage, which is actually the real thing, isn't it?
It is. The one we call the engagement.
Yeah, the one we call it is the real thing, but we call it something else. Either you do it that way, and when you do it that way, the law says you register it to benefit from certain protections. And then there is also what you call the ordinance, which is what the Christian will do. And then there is the Mohammedan marriage. Now, I know some people have an aversion to the use of the word Mohammedan, but that is what represents Islamic marriage. Remember, this law was made colonial time.
Yes, 1907.
Right. At the time, they didn't have any aversion to Mohammedan. Right. So then it just explained that if you're a Muslim and you want to marry under your religious, practice as accepted by your religion, the requirement is that you do it that way. And if you want it to be recognized by Ghanaian law, then you must respect what this law says. So, Hanifa, I come back to you. Isolate the things that are required for an Islamic marriage to be deemed as valid in Ghana law.
So under the Cap 127,
right,
it says that within 7 days after the celebration of the marriage, the bride, the bridegroom, the wali of the bride, wali is the protector or guardian of the bride, and 2 witnesses each should go to the marriage register, go to the assembly, and followed by a licensed priest, and then go and sign the marriage register. Now, as Dennis already said, there is no regime for the registration of our Muslim priests. So how do you register an Islamic marriage? That is a huge challenge. Now, put that aside. When you go to the assembly now, as you speak, tomorrow morning, go to any assembly nearest you and ask that you want the form for the registration of the Mohammedan marriage. They don't have it. Even Registrar General's Department, Accra.
First, what is the problem? If you are a Christian priest,
yes,
and you want to register,
yes,
to be known, recognized by the state,
yes,
and Dennis keep using the word gazette,
yes,
which is simply a list,
yes,
that the state recognizes and will list that this person
are the people that will recognize
as priests,
either in the Catholic Church, either in the Pentecost Church.
Right.
There's that side.
Right.
And then there's also the registration of the place of marriage.
Right. So the place of worship,
yes,
is also registered.
Yes.
Good. So if there are forms to register or gazette the clergy in Christendom,
yes,
what is the big deal, and what's the difficulty in getting the same for the Islamic priests?
It has just not been done, Samson. Not been done, nothing, zero. Which is why, I asked earlier in 1960s and 1980, Ramia and Remia, how did they register that marriage? Because as you and I speak, the regime is not there. Dennis said it, that if you go to the Interior Ministry now, they don't know what you're talking about. Because
it's the job of the Interior Ministry,
yes,
to ensure that if you are an Islamic priest,
yes,
you'll be registered,
yes,
and gazetted.
Yes. Or if you have a mosque which is recognized, it will be registered and gazetted. Now, there's also the special license under which the ordinance marriage can be registered. So, for example, if you want to have your wedding done, your Christian wedding celebrated at home or at an events garden or in your father's house, instead of everybody going to the marriage registry to sign, you can go and make arrangements under special license, and the registrar of marriages will come to the venue of your wedding, and then you can sign the marriage register. All these provisions do not exist for the Islamic marriages.
But the law provides that there's a form, and it names them. It says form this, form that as a Muslim person who has married, you are supposed to sign. So how is it that the law says these forms are there for you to sign, and you say they are not there?
It's in the law, something. You can call our mate and Registrar General and ask her, do you have this? It's not there.
So first, the people who must go to the office of the district chief executive.
Yes.
The registration is supposed to be done in the office of the district chief executive,
not the marriage
wherever you are.
Yes.
If you are a Muslim.
Yes.
It's supposed to be done in the office of the district chief executive,
yes,
within 1 week after you have come together,
yes,
to do the marriage.
Yes.
At the district chief executive's office, there are no forms for the purpose.
No, when you go there, they are confused. They don't know what you are talking about. They will show you that, oh, we have the forms for the customary marriages, and we have the forms for the Christian ordinance marriage. But the Islamic ordinance marriage, there's nothing.
So first, going to the DCE's office where the registration ought to be done, there are no forms there. The Interior Ministry is supposed to ensure that Islamic priests are gazetted.
Has not been done.
So that because you need a priest to go with you.
A priest who is licensed to go with you.
Right.
So even if you don't have a licensed priest, but you still go anyway, I'm sure people still go. Because I made personal inquiries. And, you know, it's not there. So, and I'm sure there's no LI either. That shows when the minister in the law is the Minister of Interior. And I'm sure that when the list for gazetting goes round, the Attorney General's office will deal with it. You know, it's just not there.
So in the situation where there's no priest, can't you still go as a couple together with your wali, as the law requires? It says that the bridegroom, the groom,
yes,
together with the wali and
witnesses.
2 witnesses. Then you have the priest in addition.
Yes.
If we do it without the priest,
it's not valid. The law is very clear. And the courts have strictly enforced the access because the provisions are not complicated. They're very simple. Register with.
It is actually the case that you can do without the witnesses, but you cannot do without the priest.
You can't do without the priest.
The priest is a constant.
And the form is not there. So you may even try, get a certificate and wait for its validity to be challenged in the future, isn't it? To say that the priest was, but you can't even register. So you will be presented with the 2 forms, customary and then the Christian ordinance. Okay.
Dennis, I bring you back in here. We certainly have agreed that we'll do this in 2 parts. Hopefully the next time we'll bring the Registrar of Marriages also in to assist us and other people who have the power to make sure things must happen, that these things have not happened, to also answer a few questions. But Dennis, in section 27, I read, it says, and it's titled, Marriages and Divorces Not Valid Unless Registered. Section 27:1. A marriage contracted or divorce effected after the commencement of this part by persons professing the Mohammedan faith is not valid unless registered under this part. Can anybody use this law against a Muslim's marriage when the state, who is supposed to make sure that you are able to register the marriage to make it valid, has not done its part of the job?
Something, the case law has revealed that it has been used time and time again against individuals. And it's not only, there are times where, I think when this is Jemima Wari was in charge of the entire registration, he made even that most ordinance married to are also invalid. So when it comes to the enforcement of the law, remember that the court is a servant of statute. And so the court would, one of those is that where the court will say that my hands are tied. But what the court have done is that if there is a semblance of performance of customary marriage, the court will try as much as possible to save the union and declare same as customary marriage. However, it will not be able to say that it is Islamic marriage. So if, for instance, you did the marriage and the people who are involved are, let's say, Dagombas, and in the course of performing their marriage, they performed also the Dagomba rites of customary marriage in addition to the Islamic marriage, although they are Muslims. And the court, there is evidence to show that there is a customary marriage. The court will say that although you are not validly married under Islam, in accordance with law, you are married under customary law. Because remember that in terms of the legal requirement of Islamic marriages in Ghana, there are 2 tiers. The first tier is that perform it in accordance with Islamic law. That's the first tier. Then the second tier is come and register. So there's a celebration of the marriage in accordance with Islamic, and there's a registration of the marriage. If you do not, so there is only what I call a 1-week visa window for you of your validity. Once you do not comply, case law has shown that the court is willing to strike it down. Now, what also makes it interesting is that when parties go to court, and I'm saying that I have stayed with my friends, the Zongo community. How do you say to Matamal that his husband he has married for over 30 years, that the entire society recognized as husband and wife? You have a law which was passed by the colonial master who wanted to control his people, okay, and was using this registration requirement. Because something, if you look at even chieftaincy, there were times that the state was interested in terms of who becomes a chief and all those things. So some of us, the inference of some of these laws were one of these mechanisms where the colonial master wanted to control the people. So it will use the registration requirement to ensure that imams and people who do not abide by the principles or the control of the colonial master will not be given a license. And so these colonial laws have been allowed to sit in our statute books till date. And the implication of it is huge. So although you go to court, when people do go to court, they are going to insist that I'm married under Islamic law. They do not, most of them do not know. The husband says, I married her under Mohammedans. The wife says, I married her under Mohammedan. Both parties agree that we have married under Islamic. The law and the judge says, you are not married in law. I think that that is a very unjust law.
It is, and the implications are dire. I mean, to say that the marriage is invalid means that the children born under it are what? You know, and to say that the personal law affecting the dissolution, affecting the share of property, affecting the number of wives that the man is entitled to marry under Islamic law, all of that is affected. So if you, by default, your marriage is deemed to be customary and not Islamic. Remember that Islam puts a limit of 4 on a man's, the number of women that a man can marry.
That's right.
The traditional marriage is what?
There's a customary that is...
It's 1,000
no number.
and more. It's infinite. You know, so it changes the dynamics. Now, upon divorce...
So if a spouse, particularly a woman,
yes,
does not ensure that the man's marriage is done in accordance with this law,
yes,
and they do it and say, well, we have done the traditional process, so we can say we are married, that's fine. It means she opens herself up,
yes,
for the man to marry more than 4.
Yes, unlimited.
Okay.
Because
whereas
in the eyes of the law.
Right. If they had done it under the law as the Islamic marriage is required, you would have ended at 4.
Yes.
But when someone does that within Islam,
yes,
they would have been breaching their own religious practice.
That is why it is serious. You understand? So that is why people are saying, away with the law. We believe that we are marrying in religion and we are bound by it and we don't care what the law says. But you can say that as long as it doesn't affect you. In Islam, to share property after divorce or after the death of a spouse is all spelled out in the Quran. If you look at Surah Maryam, it says how property is everything of a Muslim's life is spelled out in the Quran. Now, if you register your marriage as such, then you go by the tenets of the Quran to distribute property, to share the estate of a deceased spouse,
don't give out too much of that, because we will deal with that in our second part. I'm picking just 1 or 2 calls. We are shifting the call time for your contributions to next week when we do the part 2, so that you have a comprehensive picture of the entire situation, the consequences that flow, and what ought to be done as well before you can come in. But let's go to Edie. Edie, you are calling from Kisseman.
Yes, please.
Yes, Edie, let's hear you.
Yeah, quick one. I think the lawmakers haven't been fair to us as far as I'm a Muslim. Honestly, because when you look at the old act, which is the customary, the CNBC law 112. Initially, it made it mandatory for all customary law marriages to be registered within 3 months. And then due to public outcry, that law was amended. But I think due to probably the inactions of the Muslim intelligentsia, there hasn't been much advocacy to include, at the time the law was being amended, to actually also amend the Mohammedan law, which to take away that 1 week and make it optional, so that at least you are not mandated to do that within a week. So I think moving forward, what we have to do is that
the week, no, the thing has not been provided already. So that within the week, it's only on paper. They haven't done the thing.
Yeah, so that is why we need to amend.
Right.
We need to amend that portion of the law. And I want to plead with you to use your platform and get all the people that matter, probably through private members' bill, to get our parliamentarians to amend that law and then make it optional.
Edie, thank you so very much. I can pick one more call, but Edie's concern, which is the advocacy, is clearly the purpose for which Dennis Law has done this, research and brought the outcome for us to discuss. And we are hoping that through these processes, things will change.
Very quickly, Sam, before you proceed, since you mentioned the amendment, it's worth mentioning that there is an amendment bill before Parliament. I don't know which stage it is. I know that there have been calls for people to make their comments, and some people have sent their comments since 2019. I don't know where it has stalled and why.
Yeah, so we hear about the Muslim Marriage and Divorce Bill,
yes,
which is the one that is still pending.
Yes.
Okay, let me take my final caller. That is supposed to be Alhaji Kamal Guma. You're calling from Suhum. Let's hear you.
Yeah, good afternoon, Council. Yes, concerning this Mohammedan law, I think we will urge our Muslim scholars, and those in the legal fraternity, to be able to make sure that they canvass support from people like you and other legal people like Dennis and Co. to make sure that we have an amendment. Because when it comes to succession about marriages, everything is in the Quran. We don't need this thing is good, but they should do it according to our Islamic religion. So we should assist so that we have some amendment so that I think it will save everybody. As you all confirm that they say 80%, it's about 100%. Because we don't even know about this law that even exists. Even some lawyers who are over Muslim are not even aware of it. So they should try to assist us so that going forward this will be amended, and as the council said, it can make it even optional, or if possible take it out because the Quran has already resolved that matter for us.
So thank you very much. We understand clearly where you are coming from. It's a painful thing, like Dennis continues to repeat. Somebody is married for so many years, and then problem comes up, and then the law says you are not recognized as somebody who has married. How? Yes, Dennis, the concerns that you have heard so far, what will you say? We are just wrapping up so that we'll continue the part two.
I think, just to also to be fair, I know the Muslim caucus in Parliament are working hard on these things. The only difference that I have with them is that, and I have with the state, because when we do our research, before we even send it to the public, we make sure that Office of the President receives Attorney General. So all the major stakeholders have been talked to. I've been sent a copy of our research. There have been calls from the Office of the President. But the only problem I disagree with them is that there is no agency, in my respectful opinion. When it came to e-levy, okay, we saw how the state used all its resources to put those its way through. All that I'm asking for, and my team is asking for, is that can we take away that requirement of invalidation? That's Section 27.1. Just that one aspect. And later on, we can sit down and deliberate on the regime, whether or not we should license the mosque, whether we should license a Mohammedan priest. But let it be the same as customary law. Because remember the customary law requirement, even if you do not register it, the law still say it's valid. So can we have the state so that we can delete the invalidity clause?
That's
and I'm saying that there's one clause in the law. It will not, if we take it as e-levy, and the president decides to act on it, I am saying that it will not take the state more than 1 month to add a certificate of agency to this law for it to be deleted.
Okay, thank you very much, Dennis. Yes, Hanifa, what will be your final words? And don't say more about the effects and all of that. We'll deal with that in our second part installment, and then get the people who must tell us why these things have not been done to also tell us what they have to say.
Very well. I think I'll agree with Dennis that the law is there. It hasn't been repealed. What needs to be done even under this regime, before the amendment is done, it's really simple. We need to, license our, first of all, the advocacy, because a lot of people don't even know that there's a need to register.
That's right.
So advocacy is very important. Then the Muslim community, the clerical leadership must also, start to put their house in order to recognize who is a valid priest, so that we can send a list to the minister and say, look, these are our people, license them. Whatever the requirements from the minister is, we take it, then we license it. Then the forms are made available at the district assemblies. Even now, within a week, this is not something, if there's political will, this is something
it's that easy to do, isn't it?
It's that easy.
Just get the forms in place.
Just get the forms in place, get the people who are
and
qualified
register the
and register them. Gazette takes 21 days.
Right.
Yeah, so if we start tomorrow, in 21 days, something can happen.
Thank you very much. Dennis Ejay Jumo is Managing Partner, Law Plus Attorneys, and Hanifa Yahya is Managing Partner, Hay and Partners at Law. We just dealt with part 1 of Invalid Islamic Marriages, and God willing, next week we'll continue with the final installment. We did this on the back of a research by Dennis Law entitled Married but Not a Spouse in Law, Examining the Validity of Islamic Marriages in Ghana. I'm Samson Ladia Yenini. Have a good afternoon.